And thank you so much for being with us here on Morning Live. And of course, just turning our attention now to what has been happening with the economy. And we saw, of course, yesterday statistics, South Africa releasing the latest stats there. And South Africa's economy has rebounded strongly in the third quarter of 2022 after contracting by 0.7% in the second quarter. Now, the economy saw a growth of 1.6% in the 3 months ending in September, and thereby also avoiding a technical recession. Agriculture, forestry and fishing industries increased by 19.2%, and that contributing 0.5 percentage points, 0.5 percentage point to GDP growth. And while economists expected positive growth, its performance did exceed expectation, going well above the market forecast of about 0.7% at best. Meanwhile, ratings agency Fitch has also come out saying that findings against President Cyril Ramaphosa could bring uncertainty over the future, and that raises a risk for the country, even though the ratings agency does not foresee a radical shift in policy. Now, Dr. Iraj Abedian, CEO of the Pan-African Investments, is our guest this morning to help us work through some of these statistics. Dr. Abedian, good to have you with us here on Morning Live. Welcome.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to our viewers.
So let's start with the growth that we see in the third quarter, that of course being well above the market forecast. That was between 0.4 and 0.7% at best. Were you surprised though?
Slightly, I must say, like most other analysts, we were a bit more pessimistic than what turned out, in the sense that because you have this continuous disruption in energy, which is a problem. We had other disruptions to the economy, the least of which, as you alluded to, the political economy is not stable. And of course, the third factor, which we have to take account, is the global factor. The global geopolitical and economic conditions are not as favorable to our exports. And all of that meant that analysts and projections showed that the economy wouldn't grow as much as it has, but luckily we have had a surprise on the upside, which is always welcome.
Now, Dr. Abedian, Stats SA said that the size of the economy in the third quarter was larger than it was before the COVID-19 pandemic. And we see the agriculture sector as the biggest contributor with an increase of almost 20%. But of course, some businesses say that that is not what they are currently experiencing. So can you just explain and contextualize this for us, please?
I think that's a very important sector of our economy. That's also a very important point that you're highlighting, in the sense that agriculture is such a vast set of products and set of circumstances. Some of them are heavily dependent on our export infrastructure, some of our transportation infrastructure, some of them smaller and medium and micro enterprises are very much dependent on the type of finance that they used to get from the land bank, which has now collapsed. So I think if you just focus on agriculture, depending who you speak with, you'll get a different message. Some of them are doing extremely well, as you've seen, some of them not. It's much the same in other sectors. For example, manufacturing luckily is reviving, but manufacturing, again, a very large set of different types of enterprises, manufacturing enterprises. And all of that means that some of them are a lot more dependent and affected adversely by the repeated and non-stop disruptions in energy, some of them less so. So I think the economy is now in a situation that a little bit like the broader society. The ones who've got old capital and they've got savings and they've got ways of weathering the storms, they are doing okay. But those who don't, be they households or be they enterprises, if they do not have the reserves to cope with the additional cost of doing business as a result of lack of reliable energy, lack of policy certainty, lack of infrastructure broadly, Sakina, we cannot, and I cannot on my side, underestimate the importance of getting our transportation and ports and logistic infrastructure up to standard. They have fallen way down, and it pulls down our economy badly. And some of the enterprises are literally suffering as a result. So depending who you ask, which sector of the economy, you'll get a different message.
Indeed. And if we look at the GDP increase of 1.6% in that third quarter, what it does is it shows an increased economic activity over the period, but mainly driven, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems it's mainly driven by government expenditure because households remain under pressure. So what does this mean in real terms? Does it mean that South Africa is actually recovering at that level?
I think what's if you unpack the sources of growth, as you mentioned, agriculture was the largest growth year on year. Also, our mining sector continues doing well. Our manufacturing and our financial sectors have rebounded. With great respect, government expenditure has actually been a drag on the economy because government is pretty much under fiscal stress. It does not invest, and the money that it has, it doesn't have the capacity to put it into infrastructure that we badly need. If government got its act together, technically speaking, as an operation, as a machinery of service delivery and investment and project management, this economy would grow at 4%, 4.5%. Because our economy is a very diversified and versatile economy, and the global market, as far as commodities are concerned, as far as food and demand for agriculture is concerned, they are very favorable. But we have own goals that we have we have scored, so to speak, unfortunately. And we are not getting the environment favorable for a lot of businesses to grow. So the economy has shown good growth. We now at least reached in real terms above the pre-COVID levels. Of course, this is not something to brag about, but it's something to be in a way proud of, because against all headwinds, our private sector has managed to pull the economy back to where it was, but we need to grow a lot more, because at 1.6%, Sakina, we hardly match the per capita growth of our population, which means we're going in real terms, in terms of human welfare, in terms of average standard of living of our average household, we're going backwards. I'm not including the super rich and the rich. I'm looking and focusing on the majority of our population. This economy, if it wants to improve the lot of the downtrodden and lower income and the average household of South Africans, we have to make sure that we grow at around 3 to 3.5, ideally 4% for about 20 years. Then we'll break the back of poverty and inequality. At these levels, we're just happy that we're staying on the same spot.
So back to that age-old question, how do we get this economy going? Because this has nothing to do with COVID, because this is a pre-COVID problem. We seem to struggle. We can now talk about Eskom and COVID and all of these things, but we had this problem prior to all of that becoming a real problem. So what is actually going on?
Absolutely, Sakina. And this is such an important point to not get diverted by COVID and by Russian-Ukrainian war, etc., etc. We have basically neglected some of the basics in getting the economy to be able to weather the storms. Uncertainty, cycles of war, cycles of this and that are part of life. As a country, we need to get a few basic things in place. We got to have our infrastructure not only up to standard, but maintained. It's no good to invest in something and then neglect it. It's not good to have roads, but not maintain it. It's not good to have water facilities, dams, piping, infrastructure, and neglect it. So I think we need to get some of the basics right. No economy can maintain its growth and be able to compete if its infrastructure is not continuously upgraded and kept to standard. The second area that we need to very importantly deal with, and unfortunately we all know about it, but very difficult to solve it, is our politics has gone off the rail. Politics is important for economic growth, for economic stability and predictability of investors, etc., etc. So I think our politics must come back to the center to focus on what politics should be, not infighting and these shenanigans that they never end. We must focus on the welfare of the society, the growth of the economy, job creation. So that's the second contributed to this downturn in our economy over the past 10, 15 years. And the recent developments on Pala saga is just highly unfortunate, badly timed, and obviously very, very disappointing. The third area that we got to do is we got to focus on unlocking the incredible capacity of our economy, as opposed to being at the mercy of the cycles. For example, if the commodity cycles do well, then we're doing well. If not, then we're going the other way. In the meantime, there is a lot of growth to be done in our agro-processing, in our manufacturing, in all the sectors of the economy, including our tourism. But if we want to get our tourism growing, we need to get security and safety, our police services, our health services, and so on and so forth. All of this have to be taken care of. But in the environment that we have, the focus of the government and the capacity of the government is not there.
So to that point, and some of our commentators have always said that we can't be basically pandering all the time to what the ratings agencies want. We look at what Fitch has said. They are concerned that the outcome of the Pala Section 89 report, could, maybe cause some ripples here, and the possibility of impeachment or resignation, bringing more uncertainty regarding the future of President Cyril Ramaphosa. And how much of a risk do you think that poses? And also, they do seem assured somewhat that there won't be a huge policy shift. But what assurance do they have at this stage that there won't be massive destabilization regardless of what happens with regard to the continuity in our policies?
I think, Sakina, what I read in between what Fitch and other rating agencies are saying is that yes, political uncertainty matters. It's not a good thing. It's not a positive thing. But the South African economy has become a lot less dependent on its government than on its own resources. And that's a very important and unfortunate departure from the past. No matter who is in the office, the South African economy is going to remain fairly resourceful, very diversified, and well placed to grow. But if President Ramaphosa is impeached and somebody else comes in, they are not going to get a U-turn on the structure of the economy. They can either improve it or they can impede it, but they cannot change it. And that's what they're saying. It's a very, very complex story that politicians have made themselves irrelevant, unfortunately, and they've caused they've become an impediment to the growth. And Fitch is saying, yeah, one will go, the other one will come. Zuma has gone, Ramaphosa has come in, but the general trend of the South African economy in terms of the structure will continue. And to the extent that the global demand for some of our products, be it minerals, be it food, be it manufacturing, and so on and so forth, continues, the economy will stay more or less on track. And it's really, the question is, remember Fitch and other rating agencies focus on one thing only, and that is, can South Africa earn enough foreign exchange to pay its debt? What happens to our quality of life is not really that much of concern for them. Given that concern, they say South Africa is okay, it's got enough resources to export and pay its creditors. But it doesn't solve our domestic issue because they're not focusing on it. We need to focus on our domestic issues. What do we have to do to deal with our poor? How do we go about using our economic resources to create not only 200,000-300,000 jobs, millions of jobs, because we have so many unemployed? The Fitch and the other rating agencies are not focusing on those as much as you and I should focus.
They also say to Fitch that the electricity crisis is, of course, worrisome. Stats SA also touching on that, and specifically as it pertains to a sector such as mining. But, from where we are sitting, Dr. Abedian, it doesn't seem as though that electricity crisis is going to be dealt with effectively anytime soon. So what does this mean for our economic outlook?
It's going to be a real, self-imposed and unfortunate unknown, quite frankly. Everybody knows ESCOM has said it, government has acknowledged it, that about 55 to 60% of the generation capacity of ESCOM is broken, should have been retired or withdrawn 10 years ago. And every day that goes on, ESCOM becomes less reliable because its generation capacity becomes older, more unreliable, and subject to sudden death, so to speak, sudden breakages, sudden disruptions. So this remains an unknown disruption to our economy. And as a result, I think a few things have happened that we shouldn't forget. One is that households and the small, medium enterprises are going off the grid because technology enables them to do that. And it is the right thing to do. So big businesses mining, they're going into independent power producers as far as they can, and we've had some major investments. So what it means that increasingly, because of the dysfunctionality and unreliability of ESCOM and inability of the government to really grapple with this issue, the private sector and technology are being used to get off the grid, to create some level of certainty and reliability. It takes time. Absolutely correct. Not all industries can do it, but the majority of small and medium enterprises do. And the ones that cannot are at the mercy of ESCOM. For example, our auto manufacturers cannot do solar, cannot do wind. They need to have a far more reliable baseline energy. Some of the minings can, others, deep level mining cannot. So our economy at the moment is responding to this energy crisis that they have been facing for 15 years. It's not new. 15 years they've been facing this. So technology now enables them to slowly unpack this scrambled situation and come up with alternative solutions that is under their control, not under the control of ESCOM or politicians.
And just finally, Dr. Abedian, with regard to the festive season being upon us, household expenditure, how do you see that playing out, given that we saw the final consumption expenditure for households decreasing by 0.3%, and then we saw earlier as well food and non-alcoholic beverages were the main contributors in GDP decline in that category. You also have things like recreation, through expenditure at restaurants, transport, housing. Those, however, contributed positively to growth. So to what extent will the public actually continue to experience the high impact of inflation, and also perhaps more worrisome, what amount of money or contribution to the economy will we see from families spending during this festive season?
Sakina, one of the key engines of any economic growth is the capacity of people, households, you and I, to be able to spend. Festive season is a good example of it. It's something that conventionally and cyclically is a period that consumers, households spend in entertainment, family visits, etc., and travel. Unfortunately, as our data also shows in GDP numbers, the household services are under pressure. And this is quite clear. You and I also feel it because our incomes are not growing as much, but increase in prices of be it electricity, be it food, be it transportation, everything that we touch, the prices are going incredibly high and way out of line with our incomes. Therefore, personal services, be they restaurants, be they travel, be any other kinds of expenditure, is going to be under pressure. That's one of the engines of our economy that by and large is stalled. So we need to expect a bit of a muted festive season. And quite frankly, as an economist, from a macro point of view, it's not a bad thing. Consumers must guard against spending because it's festive season and then wake up in January and February with big debt. Rather go slower, you'll go farther than if you want to rush it and then you'll have a crash. So I think it's a very important part that households need to manage. It's a very difficult emotional thing because of festive season. Families feel that they need to have some fun and spend, but they need to cut the suit according to the cloth and watch their budgets very carefully, especially families that have got kids who January they've got to go to school. So I think they've got to provide for that first, and then what is left, think of celebration and spending.
Well, thank you so much for your time. That was economist Dr. Iraj Abedian. He's the CEO of Pan-African Investments and talking to us as the economy surprisingly grew by 1.6% in the third quarter of 2022, but also some sage advice about how to spend your money this festive season.